Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mana Fix. Today we're giving you another entry in the Commander Deck Tech series. Now, Innistrad Midnight Hunt came out not all that long ago, and we got a bunch of new commanders to play with. But there was one commander in particular that really caught my eye, and it's this creepy old guy right here.
What the hell is that?
Old Stickfingers is a really creepy looking dude with kind of a strange name, but he actually has a really cool ability that's really powerful if you build your deck right. So we're going to get into that, but before we do, if you've been here before or you happen to like the video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I'm really passionate about Magic, and I'm trying to grow the channel so I can reach a wider audience. I won't be able to do that without your help. Alright, now let's get on with the deck tech. So, good old Stickfingers is a legendary horror. He costs 1 black, 1 green, and X generic mana. He says, when you cast this spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your graveyard, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Old Stickfingers' power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So if you build this deck right, Old Stickfingers is basically going to act as a buried alive in your command zone. We're going to run just 3 creatures in total in the whole deck, so that when we cast our commander, we know exactly what creatures we're going to get. We'll talk about which creatures those are in just a bit, but first let's cover the basics. So we want to get to 5 mana as fast as possible, since our goal is to cast Old Stickfingers for X equals 3. We're running a bunch of really fast ramp to help us. For starters, we have Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl. These are both 1 mana auras that enchant a land we control. Each enchanted land is going to produce 2 mana when it's tapped rather than just 1. Being able to ramp on turn 1 is really powerful, so these are great to have in our opening hand. Soul Ring and Mana Vault are also fantastic turn 1 plays. Soul Ring will get us to 5 mana by turn 3, and Mana Vault can get that done by turn 2. Another great 1 mana card is Carpet of Flowers. With this enchantment out during one of our main phases each turn, we can add an amount of 1 color of mana equal to the number of islands that one of our opponents controls. So if we have an opponent that has, say, a breeding pool, a watery grave, and a basic island, then every turn at either our first or second main phase, we get to add 3 mana of 1 color with this enchantment. This can help out a ton over the course of a game and is an extremely efficient card. A couple other helpful enchantments we're running are Burgeoning and Exploration. Both of these are going to help us get our lands onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. Nature's Lore and 3 Visits will also help us get more lands out. These are both 2 mana sorceries that allow us to search for a forest card, which can be a dual land, and put that card into play untapped. Perhaps an obvious inclusion if you have it in your collection or you can afford it is Jeweled Lotus. This is a free-to-cast artifact that we can sacrifice for 3 mana of any 1 color. This mana has to be used to cast our commander, but again allows for us to cast our commander for the desired mana value by turn 2. Now you probably don't need me to tell you this, but Mana Crypt and Mox Diamond will also help out a ton in getting to that 5 mana mark faster. Perhaps a lesser used 0-cost artifact that we're running is Lotus Petal. This artifact can be sacrificed for 1 mana of any color. That's sort of what I like to refer to as ritual mana, since it only lasts for 1 turn. We do have 2 actual ritual cards as well. Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual are both in this deck. Both of these give us 3 black mana. Cabal Ritual costs 1 additional mana to cast, but also has a threshold ability, which says as long as we have 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we add 5 black mana instead. You'll see that we have more than a few ways to get cards into our graveyard, so we should be able to pull this off relatively easily. Now with a combo deck like this, we want to have plenty of interaction in case our opponents have something that prevents us from comboing off. That's where our removal will help out. Single target removal like Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy are able to help out in a pinch. Both of these cost 2 mana. Abrupt Decay can only hit permanents with a mana value of 3 or less, but it is a 2 mana instant speed removal spell that can't be countered, so it has quite a bit going for it. Assassin's Trophy doesn't have the mana cost restriction, but it does allow our opponent to search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield. That's fine though, because we can get rid of any type of permanent, including a land, and again, it's cheap and at instant speed. We're also running Beast Within as another way to remove any permanent type. Moving on to creature removal, we have Go for the Throat Infernal Grasp, and Slaughter Pact. I always prefer to run Go for the Throat over Doomblade for 2 mana instant speed creature removal because, in my experience, it's more likely that you'll run into black creatures than artifact creatures. Infernal Grasp is a new one that can get rid of any creature for 2 mana, again at instant speed, and the only drawback is that we lose 2 life. And then there's Slaughter Pact, which is excellent because again, this can be cast at instant speed and doesn't force us to leave any mana up. An interesting inclusion here is Dark Blast. This is a 1 black instant that gives a creature a -1/-1 until end of turn. The reason this is appropriate in this deck is the fact that it has Dredge 3. So when we cast it, it goes to our graveyard and gives us the opportunity to get it back while simultaneously filling our graveyard. So a neat little interaction here is we can cast this during our upkeep and let's say give a 2/2 a -1/-1 counter and then go to our draw step. But instead of drawing, we'll Dredge 3 and get Dark Blast back. Then we can target that 2/2 again with Dark Blast, and since that creature is now a 1/1, we'll be able to kill it off. Another card that can remove a creature in a pinch is Dismember. This card is only going to cost 1 mana if we're willing to pay 4 life to cast it, and it can get rid of anything that's a 5/5 or lower. We also have some artifact and enchantment removal in this deck. Nature's Claim is simple and gets the job done. 1 green mana at instant speed to destroy any artifact or enchantment. Our opponent gains 2 life. Who cares? And then we have Force of Vigor. This is a 4 mana instant, but it can be cast for free by exiling a green card from our hand if it's not our turn. And this can get rid of 2 artifacts and or enchantments. To round out our removal, we do want to run a couple board wipes. We've got the best of the best here in Damnation and Toxic Deluge. Both of these are staples because they're just about as efficient as can be when it comes to board wipes in these colors. So now let's talk about our win condition. Our main win con is a combo that involves 3 creature cards. Those creature cards are Phyrexian Devourer, Walking Ballista, and Necrotic Ooze. This is why we're aiming to cast Old Stickfingers for a total of 5 mana, because these 3 creatures are the only creatures in our entire deck. So when we cast Old Stickfingers for X equals 3, we know with 100% certainty that we'll get these 3 creature cards in our graveyard. So how does this combo win us the game? Well, here's how it works. What we need to do first is cast a reanimation spell to get Necrotic Ooze onto the battlefield. Necrotic Ooze says that as long as it's on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards. So we now have a 4/3 creature that has the activated abilities of Phyrexian Devourer and Walking Ballista. So what do those do? Well, Phyrexian Devourer's ability looks a little bit strange because it's an old card, but it's been errated to say exile the top card of your library, put X +1/+1 counters on Phyrexian Devourer, where X is the exiled card's mana value. Walking Ballista has 2 activated abilities. The first one says we can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on it. We won't be using this activated ability. We will, however, be using the second one, which says remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to any target. So when we combine these 2 abilities onto 1 creature, we'll be able to exile cards from our library to add counters to the ooze, and then remove those counters to deal damage to our opponents and kill them. So it's a pretty easy combo to pull off, but like I said earlier, we're going to need a reanimation spell in our hand, so we're running several of those. Animate Dead and Dance of the Dead are both great cards to have in our hand when we're ready to combo off. Both of these cards are 2 mana auras that enchant a creature in our graveyard and bring that creature back to the battlefield. Animate Dead is going to reduce that creature's power by 1, which is no big deal, and Dance of the Dead will actually give the creature +1/+1, but the creature will come back tapped. That's also not a big deal because we won't be attacking with that creature anyways. Necromancy is very similar but costs 3 mana instead of 2. If we want to, though, this card can be cast at instant speed, except then we have to sacrifice it at the end of the turn. That drawback won't come into play either because we'll be able to win with Necrotic Ooze before that trigger resolves. Instant speed wins are always better than sorcery speed wins. Speaking of instant speed wins, Wake the Dead falls into that category. For this one, we just pay 1 for X and then 2 black to return 1 creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. This card forces us to sacrifice the creature at the end of the turn, but again, we can pull off the win before that happens. The last reanimation spell I'll mention here is good old Reanimate. For 1 black mana, this gets us a creature back from any graveyard, with the only drawback being that we lose life equal to its mana value. The versatility of this spell is nice since we can target our opponent's graveyards too. When playing combos, it's also nice to have a little bit of insurance. That's why we're running Autumn's Veil and Veil of Summer. Autumn's Veil is a 1 mana instant that makes it so that our spells can't be countered by blue or black spells, and our creatures can't be targeted by spells of those colors until end of turn. We're going to want to cast this prior to comboing off to help make sure that our opponents won't interfere. Veil of Summer is almost the same thing, except that it has the potential to draw us a card if one of our opponents has cast a blue or black spell this turn. It also gives permanents we control hexproof from blue or black, not just creatures, and this effect applies to us as the player as well. Since we have a couple things that we need to make our combo work, we're going to want to run plenty of card draw and tutors so that we can find those pieces relatively easily. We'll start with the tutors here, and we're running some obvious choices like Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, and Imperial Seal if you have one or can afford it. We're also willing to run Grim Tutor and Cruel Tutor in this deck. I normally wouldn't go for 3-cost tutors, but I would also typically throw in green tutors like Worldly Tutor or something like Eldritch Evolution. But since we only have 3 total creatures in the entire deck, we can't really run those cards. So we're willing to settle for the 3-cost tutors that will get us any card. Next we have Diabolic Intent. This is a 2 mana anything goes to your hand tutor, but has an additional cost of sacrificing a creature. This is something we can play after casting our commander. We sacrifice our commander to go get a reanimation spell and then cast that to win the game. Entomb and Buried Alive are a couple less common but fantastic additions to this deck. Entomb is an instant speed tutor for 1 black mana that allows us to search our library for any card and put it into our graveyard. We could search for one of our combo pieces with this, or if we're playing this on turn 1, we might search for a Life from the Loam to start getting cards into our graveyard early. Buried Alive is a card that is going to accomplish exactly what our commander is designed to do, but it's only going to cost us 3 mana to cast the spell as opposed to the 5 for our commander. Buried Alive lets us search for 3 creature cards and put them into our graveyard. So we'll get the only 3 creatures from our deck and put them into our graveyard, then follow this up with a reanimation spell to win the game. Believe it or not, there is actually a way that we can win on turn 1 using this card. Let's say we end up with a Swamp, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Buried Alive, and Reanimate in our opening hand. If we play the Swamp, then cast Dark Ritual, we have 3 mana. Use 2 of that mana to cast Cabal Ritual, and now we have a total of 4 black mana. We can use 3 of that mana to cast Buried Alive to search for our combo pieces and put them into our graveyard. We still have 1 black mana left over, so we use that to cast Reanimate, targeting Necrotic Ooze. If that resolves, we win the game on turn 1. Yeah, that's definitely Magical Christmas Land, I know, but still it's fun to know that it's in there and it's possible to pull off. Now let's talk about the card draw. Sylvan Library and Phyrexian Arena are both here. These are cards that we're going to want to get out early since they provide consistent card draw and are going to get better and better the longer that they remain on the battlefield. Next we have Night's Whisper and Sign in Blood. 2 2-mana options that each draws 2 cards and have the drawback of having to lose 2 life. At 2 mana, we're also running Grisly Salvage. I like this one because it's instant speed, it gets cards into our graveyard, and it's great if we really need to draw into a land. Life from the Loam can also help us fill our graveyard. Now the reason that Dredge is helpful to us is because if we can manage to get 1 or more of our combo pieces into the graveyard without casting our commander, we'll be able to win the game that much faster because it will in essence make our commander cheaper to cast. Life from the Loam will also help us hit our land drops by getting lands back from our yard. We've also got Read the Bones, which costs a bit more but allows us to scry 2 before we draw, so we'll get to be a little bit more selective with what we draw. Now let's get on to the hard-hitting card draw cards. First, we've got Bolas's Citadel. We're working on a very low curve with this deck, so many of our spells are going to have a mana value of 3 or less. That means paying life to cast spells instead of mana won't hurt too much, and playing them off the top of our library will provide a ton of card advantage. Next up is Necropotence. This enchantment will basically allow us to draw cards to our heart's content, as long as we have 1 life to pay for each card. Now with this card, we have to be careful because any card that we discard will immediately be exiled while this is out. So if we end up drawing into our combo pieces, we'll have to keep those cards in our hand, which is not ideal. But we can use something like Scroll Rack to put those cards back and draw new ones to keep them out of our hand. Finally, we come to one of the best cards in the deck, Ad Nauseam. This is an instant speed spell that is going to draw us tons of cards. For each card we put into our hand, we lose life equal to its mana value, but this drawback will be totally worth it because we should be able to find everything we need in order to win the game. And this may not hurt us as much as you might think because most of our spells have a mana value of 2 or less. Now to finish off this deck tech, let's discuss the utility lands. Ancient Tomb is an obvious choice because it's going to help us get to 5 mana faster. Urza's Saga will also help us ramp because we'll be able to search our deck for a mana rock and put it onto the battlefield once the Saga gets its 3rd lore counter. We're running Strip Mine and Wasteland as ways to deal with problematic lands that our opponents have. Nurturing Peatland is also worth mentioning as it can draw us a card in the late game if we're getting desperate. Dakmor Salvage adds another instance of dredge to the deck to help get cards into our yard. And then we have Agadeem's Awakening, which is the perfect modal double-faced card for this deck. With this, we can choose to play it as a reanimation spell if we're ready to put Necrotic Ooze onto the battlefield, or we can play this as a land that taps for black. Well, that's it for today's deck tech. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. You can also follow the Manifix on Twitter and Instagram using the handles in the description. And as always, thanks for getting your fix with me today. Stay safe out there. Peace out, guys.